Well, this track's slowly coming together. We've now got the drums and the bass that are working together and forming that all essential groove. We have the lead timbre plucking away in the background. I have to say that carefully. And finally, we've got the pads that are playing along. Pretty much our initial ideas that we got down in MIDI at the very beginning have started to evolve into a track now that in our opinion anyway, is certainly starting to go somewhere. So I suppose the big question now is, well, what next? Well, I wouldn't suggest going for arrangement yet. I certainly don't think we've got enough instruments to go for an arrangement. You do have to be careful not to have too many ideas in the pot, but I certainly don't think we've got enough to complete a full arrangement. We know that we're going for a saw lead, but I wouldn't like to approach that yet either, because I feel we need another instrument in there to make sure that we don't build a lead that will take up the rest of the frequencies in our production so far. So we'll have a quick listen back to it. Now, I've mentioned this time and time again, and I'm going to mention it again here in an attempt to drill it into you. Pop on a set of headphones, close your eyes, and listen back to what you have so far. Let your creative mind go free and just let it take over. As I've said before, just as your mind will impose a talk onto a clock when it only really consists of a tick, 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 eventually it'll superimpose something onto this track, and basically it's what we're going to do now. I mean, it may take 5 minutes, it may take an hour, but it does happen eventually. And I think the important thing here is that if it doesn't, you're just not in the right frame of mind. Just take a break, come back later, and listen again. It will happen. Now, once that rhythm comes into your head, I can't stress the importance that you don't ignore that initial urge. Don't try and better it. Don't think that you only have part of it, so you'll try and imagine the rest. The best thing to do is stamp it down, play it in, scribble it down, hum it into your computer, into a dictaphone, whatever. You just have to do something to ensure you get that idea down. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to play this loop back, basically for as long as it takes. We're going to play this back until we get a rhythm in our heads that we can work with. So while we're playing this back, you listen to and see if a rhythm comes into your head. You just have to bear with us for a minute. We think we've got an idea to go down here. Move that to there. Well, I mean, the first thing you've probably noticed here is that we've actually stamped these ideas down using a piano. Now, there's a good reason for this. This far into a production, you need to use a standard instrument. And for us, a piano is just about perfect. The reason is, if you try to write in a synth, you can find it a lot more difficult because it could have a lot of movement in the filters, the LFOs could be running wild, velocity can affect its performance. And on top of that, the frequencies of a complex synth timbre can clash with what you already have down. And plus, it may send you off in another direction, which is fine. But for us, we want to try and stay on the direction we're heading in at the moment with the saw timbre, obviously, for the purpose of this DVD. Well, now we have this melody down, though. Now, we're not actually going to change this timbre because I'm quite liking the sound of the piano in the mix there. It's a bit Robert Miles. So what we're going to do is, for now at least, we're going to leave that in. But I think an important thing here is that because we're using a real world instrument in the mix, it's particularly important to humanise the part. Well, you can get away with strict timing on general synths and synthetic instruments in dance music. You find that if you introduce any real world instruments into the mix, it's worth adding a little humanisation so it comes across as if it's actually being played by a human being. If you keep it strictly quantised, it can just make the record sound a little too strange. We'll just start at some velocities. What we can do is we can use Logic's Humanise function. This will be available on your sequence as well. It's basically just a way of adding humanisation. We'll just adjust these. Every time we click here, it adjusts the timing, size and velocity of the notes, so you just keep hitting it a few times just to add some human elements to the playing. That's not bad. One thing though is the piano sounded a little too bright on the top end for me, so we'll use a filter to remove the very top end. Yeah, we'll use this one. I'll just drop that down. Yeah, that's okay. I think we'll put the SPL transient design and just take the front end off the note. Yeah, that's better. I think we could do with just a bit of small amount of distortion on that, just to grunge it up a bit and pull it out of the mix. We're just using this to make it ring out that little bit more. This is just it's a bog standard piano in Logic on the EXS sampler. That's not sounding bad. It's starting to fit in the mix. Yeah, I think that fits quite well now. I think you may have noticed this throughout us working all the way through these sessions, but if you haven't, I'm going to mention it here anyway. Now, you may have noticed that we tend to mix down the instruments to suit the mix whilst we're writing. I mean, we haven't just thrown a drum in there, programmed a bass, chords, leads, the piano melody, and just said, oh, yeah, we'll make room for them in the mix. As we've moved along throughout, we've always paid attention to the mix. We've always listened to how it fits in with the mix and how the instrument behaves. And then we've used filters, processing, effects, including reverb. Not to only make the timbre sound correct, but also to help fit it in the mix. You see, the thing is that the mix should be seen as the final polish and not an entirely corrective procedure that it's often touted as. By using reverb and the transient designer, we've pushed sounds around the mix already without even touching EQ surgically, and we haven't panned at all. Now, if we can accomplish that at this stage, and it sounds well now, then the mix becomes much simpler because we can just use the mix to make space, or air if you will. You see, a lot of beginners seem to miss the bigger picture when mixing trance. For them, it's always been, if I throw this here with panning, I'll make room for this to sit over there, and I can build this huge wall of sound with every instrument heard clearly, but it's still a huge wall of pure sound, and it doesn't really work like that. A better way to look at mixing trance is, it's not what you hear, it's what you don't hear that makes a great mix. It shouldn't be seen as, let's fill everything and build this huge wall of sound. In fact, you should view it as the complete opposite. Rather than try to fill spaces, try to create them. If you think opposite when mixing trance and try to create room instead of filling it, you'll find that the mix will really improve from it. And by working on our instruments while we're programming the timbres and making them fit into the mix by programming rather than just saying, well, we can mix that in later, we're making it easy to create space in the mix later. And if you listen back to what we have so far, although it's not sounding perfectly mixed, each instrument's audible. You can hear it well and it's coming through. Therefore, mixing is going to be a lot easier when we eventually come to it.